The indigenous problem is identified with the land problem. The ignorance, backwardness, and misery of the indigenous people are only the consequence of their servitude. The communities that have demonstrated a truly amazing persistence and resistance under the harshest oppression represents the natural factor for socialization of the land in Peru. The Indian has an ingrained habit of cooperation. Even when community ownership passes to individual ownership, cooperation is maintained and the heavy work is shared. This is true not only in the highlands, but also on the coast, where a higher level of mixing acts against indigenous customs. With minimal effort, the community can become a cooperative. Theoretically and practically, the conservative Criollo behaves as an heir to the colony and as a descendant of conquest. For Pasadistas, the national begins in the colonial. The indigenous are in their sentiment, but not in their thesis. Conservatism can only conceive of or admit a Peruvian formed in the molds of Spain and Rome. This sense of Peruvianness limits the history of the Peruvian homeland to 4 centuries. And 4 centuries of tradition must seem very little to any nationalism, even the most modest and illusory. No solid nationalism appears in our time as an elaboration of only 4 centuries of history. To feel a more respectable and illustrious antiquity behind them, reactionary nationalists invariably resort to annexing not only the whole past and all the glory of Spain, but also the whole past and glory of Latinidad. Peru, as these people represent it, does not descend from the native Inca. It descends from the foreign empire that imposed its law, religion, and language 4 centuries ago. Maurice Perez, in a phrase that is certainly held as an article of faith by our reactionaries, said that the homeland is the land and its dead. No nationalism can do without land. This is the drama that, in addition to availing itself of an imported ideology, represents the spirit and interests of the conquest and the colony in Peru. In opposition to this spirit, the vanguard advocates Peruvian reconstruction on an indigenous foundation. Among us, Pasadistas are satisfied with the fragile, gallant memories of the viceroyalty. The vanguard, meanwhile, seeks for its work more genuinely Peruvian, more remotely ancient materials. And their indigenismo is not a literary speculation or a romantic pastime. It is not an indigenismo that, like many others, is resolved and exhausted in an innocuous apology of the Inca Empire and its splendors. The revolutionary indigenistas, instead of a platonic love for the Inca past, manifest an active and concrete solidarity with today's Indian. Those who have no wish to venture into other fields will easily see the national sense and value of all positive and authentic vanguardism in literature and art. The most national of any literature is always the most profoundly revolutionary. This is very logical and clear. There is no real conflict between the revolutionary and tradition, except for those who conceive tradition as a museum or a mummy. Revolutionaries embody the will of society not to petrify itself in a stadium, not to immobilize itself in an attitude. Sometimes society, paralyzed by a feeling of exhaustion or disenchantment, loses this creative will. A new school, a new literary or artistic tendency seeks its foundation in the present. If it does not find this, it perishes. On the other hand, the old schools, the old tendencies, are content to represent the spiritual and formal remnants of the past. Therefore, conceiving the nation as a static reality can only be imagined as a national spirit and inspiration among the imitators and enthusiasts of an old art, and not by the creators or innovators of a new art. A nation lives more so in the precursors of its future than in the survivors of its past.